I never thought something as simple as checking my mailbox would turn into one of the most stressful and emotional chapters of my life. At first it seemed small, almost too small to even complain about. A missing bill here, a package that never arrived, a letter I had been waiting for weeks just disappearing without a trace. I kept telling myself maybe it was a mistake, maybe the postal service lost it, maybe it was just one of those things that happen. But deep down, I had this strange feeling that something was not right, that someone was actually messing with my life in ways I couldn't yet prove. It all started when I noticed how often my neighbor, let's call her Karen, seemed to linger near my front yard. She was the kind of person everyone in the neighborhood knew for her attitude, always complaining about people's lawns, telling kids not to play too loudly, filing petty reports with the HOA. She had that air of control, like she thought she owned not just her house but the entire street. Still, I never imagined she would be bold enough to go through someone else's mailbox. The first time I actually felt something was off was when my credit card statement didn't arrive. I shrugged it off, called the bank, and had them send me a replacement. But then it kept happening. Important documents, birthday cards from my family, even a small package I ordered online, all vanished. Every time I walked to that mailbox, I felt this weird pit in my stomach, like I was being tricked. You know that feeling when your gut tells you something isn't just coincidence? That's exactly what I was living with, day after day. At first, I thought maybe it was kids in the neighborhood playing pranks. Or maybe porch pirates who decided to extend their stealing into mailboxes. But then I started noticing Karen's pattern. She always seemed to be outside when the mail truck arrived. If she wasn't pretending to water her plants, she was taking out the trash she didn't need to take out, or just walking slowly up and down the sidewalk. And every time I came home from work, she gave me that look, that smug little smirk, like she knew something I didn't. One night, I was lying in bed when I heard footsteps outside. At first I thought it was just someone walking their dog late. But then I heard the sound of my mailbox creaking open. My heart pounded in my chest as I pulled back the curtain just slightly, trying not to be seen. And there she was, Karen, standing right at my mailbox in the middle of the night. My hands shook as I watched her, my brain struggling to make sense of it. She reached in, pulled something out, and quickly tucked it under her sweater before casually walking back toward her house as if nothing had happened. I couldn't believe my eyes. I wanted to run outside, to scream at her, to demand she give me back whatever she had taken. But I froze. I just stood there, watching her shadow disappear into her house, my blood boiling with anger and disbelief. This wasn't just random mail going missing. This was my neighbor, the woman who waved at me during the day, who pretended to be part of a normal community, secretly stealing from me under the cover of darkness. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but it was nearly impossible. I saw her outside trimming her bushes, and she smiled at me like nothing happened. That fake smile burned in my mind because I knew what she had done just hours before. I wanted to say something, but I didn't have solid proof yet. If I accused her without evidence, she would deny it, maybe even turn the HOA against me. Karen was good at playing the victim when it suited her, and I wasn't going to fall into that trap. Still, the anger and frustration built up inside me. Every time I opened that empty mailbox, I felt more violated. It wasn't just about bills or packages anymore. It was about trust, privacy, and dignity. Your mailbox is supposed to be safe, protected by law, your own little connection to the outside world. And here was Karen, treating it like her personal shopping basket. One evening, I decided to test my suspicions. I put a small, harmless envelope inside the mailbox. Nothing valuable, just a piece of paper folded inside. I knew it had no reason to be taken. I left it there overnight, and the next morning it was gone. No postal worker had come, no delivery was scheduled. Nothing. It was obvious now. Someone was taking it, and that someone was her. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how far this could go. If she had access to my personal information, my bank details, even small things like family letters, what else could she do? Identity theft? Fraud? Or was she just doing it for the thrill of power, knowing she could get away with it? Either way, the thought of Karen having that control over my life filled me with both fear and rage. Days turned into weeks, and the thefts didn't stop. In fact, they grew bolder. It wasn't just once in a while anymore. It felt like every other day something was missing. And every time I saw her outside, standing near my yard, pretending to be innocent, it made my blood boil. But then came the night that changed everything, the night I caught her in the act once again. It was late, around midnight, when I heard the sound. That creak of metal, the unmistakable noise of my mailbox being opened. My heart raced as I rushed to the window, and there she was again. This time I could see more clearly. She was holding a small stack of envelopes, shoving them quickly into a bag she carried. The sight made me sick. This wasn't just a one-time mistake or a moment of weakness. She had been stealing from me, deliberately, repeatedly, with zero guilt. I pressed my face closer to the glass, barely breathing as I watched her retreat down the sidewalk. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness. I had seen her with my own eyes, caught her red-handed. And in that moment, my frustration turned into determination. Something had to be done, and I was going to make sure she didn't get away with it any longer. But what I didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. The deeper I dug, the more shocking the truth about Karen would become. After that night, when I saw Karen with my own eyes stealing from my mailbox, everything around me began to feel different. The neighborhood didn't feel safe anymore. My own home didn't feel private, and every time I stepped outside, I felt like I was walking into some twisted game she was playing with me. What made it worse was the way she acted during the day. She would wave at me with this overly sweet smile, the kind of smile that looked innocent to everyone else but felt like pure mockery to me. She was stealing from me at night and pretending to be a friendly neighbor in the morning, and that two-faced behavior made my stomach turn. I wanted to shout it to the world, to expose her right there on the street, but I knew I couldn't yet. Without solid proof, it would be my word against hers, and Karen had a way of twisting situations to her advantage. The more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. I started keeping track of everything that went missing, and the list kept growing: credit card statements, medical bills, packages I had been excited for, even small letters from friends and family. I remember waiting for a birthday card my mom had told me she sent with a gift card inside. It never came. My mom thought maybe it got lost, but I knew the truth. It wasn't lost. Karen had taken it. That realization hit me hard because it wasn't just about money or documents anymore. It was about memories, love, and personal connections being stolen from me by someone who lived just a few steps away. One morning, as I walked to the mailbox, I caught her watching me. She was pretending to water her plants, but her eyes never left me. I opened the mailbox, hoping to find something, anything, but it was empty again. I glanced at her and she quickly looked away, but not before I saw that smirk again. It was the kind of smirk that screamed, "I know something you don't. I'm winning, and you can't stop me." That was the moment I realized she wasn't just stealing for convenience or desperation. She was doing it because it gave her power. She wanted to control, to humiliate, to make me feel small. And the worst part was, it was working. I tried confronting her indirectly. I walked over one afternoon and casually mentioned that my mail kept disappearing, hoping her reaction would reveal something. She gasped dramatically and acted shocked, saying things like, "Oh no, that's terrible. You should really contact the post office." Her performance was flawless, almost too flawless, like she had rehearsed it in her head 1,000 times. She even suggested maybe kids in the neighborhood were messing around. I nodded politely, but inside I was burning. She was standing right in front of me, lying through her teeth, pretending to care while she was the very reason my life felt like it was unraveling. Then something happened that pushed me over the edge. One afternoon, while taking out the trash, I noticed a piece of paper sticking out from Karen's garbage bin. Normally, I would never go near someone else's trash, but something about that paper caught my attention. I pulled it out, and my heart nearly stopped. It was one of my letters, ripped open, crumpled, and thrown away like it meant nothing. My name was still on the envelope, clear as day. I stood there frozen, my hands shaking as I held it, realizing I had just stumbled upon the first real piece of proof. She wasn't just sneaky. She was careless. She thought she could do whatever she wanted and never get caught. I rushed back inside, holding that letter like it was a piece of treasure. For the first time, I felt like I had some power back, like maybe I wasn't as helpless as I thought. But even then, doubt crept into my mind. What if I confronted her with this and she said I planted it? What if she flipped the story and accused me of snooping through her trash? People in the neighborhood already knew her as difficult, but she had a way of playing the victim so convincingly that I worried they might believe her. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I stared at that ripped envelope over and over, imagining all the times she must have opened my letters in the privacy of her home. Did she laugh when she read them? Did she feel proud that she was invading my life? Or was she just tossing them aside without a second thought? The anger inside me built like a storm, and I knew this couldn't go on forever. Something had to change. Days passed, and I started to see Karen differently. Every move she made seemed calculated. The way she lingered outside at the exact time the mail truck came. The way she conveniently bumped into me at the mailbox, pretending to be surprised I was there. She was careful, but now that I had caught her once, I saw through her little games. And still, I couldn't catch her red-handed with undeniable proof. She was slippery, like a snake that knew when to hide in the grass and when to strike. One evening, I sat by the window, determined to watch every move she made. Hours went by, and finally, I saw her creeping toward my yard again. This time, she didn't notice I was watching. She opened my mailbox, glanced around, and pulled something out quickly. My fists clenched as I watched her shove it into her bag and hurry back to her house. I wanted to run outside and stop her, but something told me to wait. If I ran out too soon, I'd lose my chance at building a stronger case. As she disappeared into her house, I sat there in the dark, heart pounding, knowing I had just witnessed her stealing again. This time, I didn't just feel angry. I felt determined. I knew I had to outsmart her, to find a way to expose her lies without giving her the chance to twist it back on me. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to let Karen keep winning. She thought she was untouchable, but she was wrong. She thought she could keep stealing and smiling and pretending to be innocent, but her time was running out. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of something bigger. And as I closed my eyes, I replayed the image of her walking away with my mail in her hands. That image burned into my memory, fueling the fire inside me. Because deep down I knew, one day soon I was going to catch her for real. By this point, the situation with Karen had turned from frustrating to unbearable, and it felt like every part of my life was being invaded. Each day that passed, I grew more restless and more angry, and the thought of her hands rifling through my personal mail made me feel sick. I could almost picture her sitting in her living room, tearing open envelopes that weren't hers, reading my business like she had the right to, and throwing away the things that didn't interest her. The more I thought about it, the deeper my anger sank, until it reached a place where it wasn't just about missing letters or packages anymore. It was about respect, about dignity, about not letting someone walk all over me in my own neighborhood. The breaking point came on a day that should have been normal, a day where I was simply waiting for something important to arrive. I had been expecting a legal document from my bank, something critical that I needed to sign, and when it didn't come, I felt the dread creeping in before I even checked the mailbox. When I opened that little metal door and saw it empty, my hands went cold, because I already knew what had happened. Karen had it. That woman had once again crossed into my life, and this time she had taken something more than just a card or a bill. She had taken something that had real weight, something that could cause actual harm to me if it was lost. I felt helpless, standing there on the curb, clutching the edge of the mailbox so hard my knuckles turned white. While across the street I could see Karen, sipping her coffee like she didn't have a care in the world. She smiled at me when our eyes met, and it was the most infuriating moment of my life. That smug grin told me everything. It told me she knew exactly what she had done, and she knew I couldn't stop her. That night, I paced the floor of my house, trying to think of what to do. My mind raced with scenarios. Confronting her face to face, going to the HOA, even shouting it out loud so the whole street could hear. But the truth was, I didn't have the kind of proof that would hold up if she denied it. All I had were suspicions, a ripped envelope from her trash, and my own eyes. It wasn't enough, and she knew it. She had been careful, always looking around, always making sure no one saw her, except for those times when she wanted me to see her, when she wanted me to feel powerless. It was a game to her, a cruel one, and I was tired of playing by her rules. That was when I remembered something a friend had once told me about mail theft, that it wasn't just a nuisance, it was a federal crime. If I could get the right people involved, maybe I could finally put an end to this. I started researching online, scrolling through page after page, and that's when I learned about the Postal Inspector Service. They were the ones who handled cases like this, the ones who had the authority to go after people who thought they could get away with stealing other people's mail. The idea gave me a sliver of hope, but also a new kind of fear. Could I really call them? Could I really involve federal authorities against my neighbor? Part of me felt guilty, like maybe it was too much, but then I thought about everything she had taken from me, everything she had destroyed, and that guilt turned back into anger. She didn't care about me, so why should I care about protecting her from the consequences of her own actions? I picked up the phone and dialed the number, my heart pounding as I explained my situation to the man on the other end. He listened carefully, asked me a few questions, and then said the words that sent a chill down my spine. "You did the right thing by calling us. We'll set up a sting." I sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of those words settling in. A sting operation. Against Karen. Against the woman who had tormented me for weeks, maybe months, without a single ounce of guilt. Suddenly, the power balance had shifted. Suddenly, she wasn't the one in control anymore. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair, my chest heaving as relief and fear mixed inside me. For the first time, I felt like I had a chance to fight back, like justice wasn't just some dream I kept hoping for. But with that hope came a new wave of anxiety. What if she found out I had reported her? What if the sting didn't work and she slipped away again? What if this whole thing backfired and somehow she turned it on me? My mind spun with possibilities, but underneath it all was one steady, unshakable thought. I was finally taking action. I was finally standing up for myself. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. Every time I saw Karen outside, I had to force myself to act normal, to smile and nod like nothing was wrong, even though inside I wanted to scream at her. She went about her routine like she always did, watering her plants, pretending to check her own mailbox, chatting with neighbors. She had no idea that the walls were starting to close in on her. No idea that her little game was about to come to an end. I watched her carefully, noting every move she made, every glance toward my yard. And with each passing day, my anticipation grew stronger. But nothing could prepare me for the moment the inspectors told me what they planned to do next. They weren't just going to watch her. They were going to bait her, to set up a trap so perfect that she wouldn't be able to resist. And when she took that bait, there would be no denying it anymore. She would be caught right there in the act with nowhere to run. The thought sent shivers down my spine, equal parts excitement and fear, because this was it. This was the turning point, the moment everything was building toward. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, I whispered to myself that it was almost over, that Karen was about to face the consequences she thought she could escape. But even then, in the quiet of my own room, I couldn't shake the image of her smirking face, or the nagging thought that somehow, some way, she might find a way to slip through the cracks. And that was when the inspector's final words echoed in my mind. "We're going to set a trap." The day the inspectors told me they were ready to set the trap was the day my entire perspective shifted, because for weeks I had been living under the shadow of fear and frustration, constantly looking over my shoulder and wondering when Karen would strike next. But now the power was shifting. Now there was a plan in place that could finally expose her for what she really was. The inspectors were calm and professional, and they explained every step of what they were going to do. But my heart was racing so fast that I could barely focus on their words. All I knew was that this was it. This was the chance to finally bring her down. They told me they would place a bait package inside my mailbox, something that looked ordinary on the outside but was marked and tracked so they could prove without a doubt if it was stolen, and they would also set up a hidden camera that could capture the entire act on video. The idea thrilled me and terrified me at the same time because I knew how bold Karen could be, and I kept wondering what if she suspected something, what if she saw through the plan, what if she somehow found a way to turn the tables again. But the inspectors assured me that this was what they did best, that people like Karen always thought they were too clever, too sneaky, But in the end, their arrogance was what brought them down. When the day came, I woke up early, my stomach in knots, every sound outside making me jump. I watched as the inspector carefully placed the bait package inside the mailbox, a plain brown box that looked no different from any other delivery, and then he installed the small hidden camera that was nearly impossible to spot. My job was simple. Act normal, don't change my behavior, don't let Karen suspect a thing. That was easier said than done, because every time I glanced toward her house, I felt like she could somehow read my mind, like she could see the trap waiting for her. The hours dragged on as I tried to distract myself, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept peeking out the window, my heart leaping every time I saw movement. And then it happened. In the late afternoon, the mail truck drove by and made its usual stops, and not long after, I saw Karen emerge from her house. She was casual as always, pretending like she just happened to be outside at the right time. But I could see the way her eyes flickered toward my yard, the way she adjusted her sweater as she slowly walked down the sidewalk. My hands were trembling as I pulled back the curtain, barely breathing, watching her every step. She looked around carefully, pretending to check her phone, pretending to tie her shoelace, but I knew what she was really doing. Scanning the street, making sure no one was watching. And then she made her move. She walked straight to my mailbox, glancing over her shoulder one last time before pulling the door open. My chest tightened as I saw her eyes lock onto the package, and in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. I could see her smirk, that familiar expression of triumph, as she reached inside and pulled the box out. She tucked it quickly under her arm, as if she had done it 100 times before, and turned to head back toward her house. From where I stood, it felt like I was screaming inside, wanting to burst out the door and confront her right then and there, but I forced myself to stay still because I knew the inspectors were watching. I knew the plan was in motion, and this was exactly what needed to happen. But then something unexpected occurred. As she walked away, the inspectors who had been waiting nearby suddenly appeared, stepping out from where they had been hidden. Karen froze in her tracks, her face draining of color as they approached her. I couldn't hear their exact words from inside the house, but I could see the shock on her face, the way her mouth opened and closed as she tried to come up with an excuse. One of the inspectors pointed at the package in her hands, and she hesitated for just a second before trying to shove it back toward them, as if she could undo what she had just done. But it was too late. They had her, caught in the act, no room to deny it. I pressed my forehead against the glass, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment all the anger and frustration of the past weeks had been building toward. Karen's body language shifted from shock to anger to panic in just a matter of seconds, and I could tell she was scrambling to find a way out. She gestured toward my house, raising her voice, as if she was trying to blame me somehow, trying to twist the story in her favor. But the inspectors didn't budge. They were calm, professional, and firm, and I could see one of them holding up the hidden camera that had captured everything. Karen's face went pale as she realized she was trapped, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw her confidence crack. Still, part of me didn't feel relief yet. I knew Karen, and I knew she wasn't going to give up easily. She was the kind of person who would fight tooth and nail, who would lie and manipulate until the very end. I watched as she tried to laugh it off, as if it was all some kind of misunderstanding, but the inspectors didn't buy it. They told her clearly what she was being accused of, and I could see the neighbors starting to peek out of their windows, drawn by the commotion. A part of me felt embarrassed that this was all happening right in front of the street, but another part of me felt vindicated, like finally everyone could see the truth I had been living with for so long. As the inspectors continued their questioning, I realized this was far from over. Catching her with the package was one thing, but proving the full extent of her theft, proving just how long she had been stealing, that was going to be another battle. And the thought both thrilled and terrified me, because if they dug deeper, who knew what else they might find? Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor with too much free time. She was someone who had invaded my life in ways I was only beginning to understand. That night, as I sat in my living room replaying the entire scene over and over in my head, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, yes, but also unease. Because while the sting had worked perfectly and Karen had been caught red-handed, there was still a question burning in my mind, a question that kept me awake long into the night. What else had she taken? What else had she been hiding all this time? And that was the part that terrified me the most, because I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The sight of Karen standing there with the bait package in her hands, cornered by the inspectors, should have felt like the end of everything, but in truth, it was only the beginning of a much bigger storm, because the sting operation wasn't just about catching her in the act. It was about peeling back the layers of lies she had built around herself, and as I stood at my window watching the inspectors confront her, I could see the cracks in her carefully constructed mask begin to show. She tried to play innocent at first, holding her hands up, insisting that she had only picked up the package by mistake, that she thought it was hers. But the inspectors didn't waver. They explained calmly that they had been watching her for weeks, that the package she held was part of an ongoing investigation, and that the hidden camera had captured every second of what she had just done. For the first time, I saw panic in Karen's eyes, that flash of realization that she wasn't in control anymore, and it sent a strange wave of relief through me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't going to give up without a fight. The neighborhood began to stir as more people peeked out of their windows, and some even stepped onto their porches, whispering among themselves as the scene unfolded. Karen, who had spent so long policing everyone else's behavior and pretending to be the guardian of the neighborhood, was now standing in the middle of the street with inspectors closing in on her. I could hear her voice rising, sharp and desperate, trying to spin excuses, first saying she thought she was helping by picking up the package, then accusing me of setting her up, claiming I had been targeting her unfairly. Her words were loud, shaky, and filled with desperation, but the more she talked, the guiltier she looked. The inspectors didn't argue with her. They simply read her the charges, explaining that stealing mail was a federal crime and that she was under arrest. That word, arrest, rang in my ears like a bell, and for a moment I couldn't believe it was actually happening. After weeks of feeling powerless, after nights of pacing my floor in anger and fear, I was finally seeing justice unfold right before my eyes. But the most shocking part came when they led her back toward her house. At first I didn't understand why they were going there, but then one of the inspectors explained that they had a warrant to search her property for stolen mail. My heart leapt into my throat as I realized what this meant. This wasn't just about a single package. This was about uncovering the full scope of what Karen had been doing. As they walked her up the driveway, her protests grew louder, her face red with anger, shouting that this was harassment, that she hadn't done anything wrong. But the inspectors ignored her and stepped inside. I couldn't stop myself from moving closer, standing just outside my yard as I watched them go in. And my neighbors began gathering too, drawn by the drama, whispering in disbelief. Minutes passed like hours until finally one of the inspectors emerged carrying a small box filled with envelopes. My heart skipped as I recognized some of them instantly. Letters I had been waiting for weeks ago, bills with my name printed clearly on them, things I had long given up on ever seeing again. My stomach churned as the reality sank in. She hadn't just stolen once or twice. She had been hoarding my mail for weeks, maybe even months, treating my life as if it were her own collection of trophies. And it didn't stop with me. Soon, they carried out more boxes, more envelopes, more packages, each one belonging to different neighbors on the street. Gasps rose from the small crowd as people recognized their own names, their own missing letters, things they too had assumed were lost in the system. The betrayal spread like wildfire as everyone realized this wasn't just my problem. Karen had been stealing from the entire neighborhood. The inspectors laid everything out carefully, cataloging each item as Karen continued to shout from the porch, her voice cracking with fury and denial. But it was clear her words meant nothing anymore. The evidence was stacked against her, literally in boxes piled high on her lawn for everyone to see. One of the inspectors held up a package addressed to an elderly couple down the street, and I saw the husband step forward, his face pale as he whispered that they had been waiting months for medication that never arrived. The weight of that moment hit all of us hard. This wasn't just petty theft. This was dangerous. This was cruel. This was life-altering. I felt my chest tighten as I thought about the birthday card from my mother, the gift card she had lovingly sent, the personal letters from friends that I had never even had the chance to read. Each item in those boxes represented trust that had been broken, connections that had been severed, and the more I looked at it, the angrier I became. Yet, at the same time, there was a deep sadness in me, sadness that someone I had once considered just an annoying neighbor had been capable of something this vile. She wasn't just a busybody with too much time on her hands. She was a thief, a liar, and someone who had built her sense of power by taking from others. The inspectors finally placed her in handcuffs, and the sound of that click echoed louder in my mind than anything else. Karen's face twisted in disbelief as they led her toward the waiting car, shouting that this wasn't fair, that she didn't deserve this, that we were all against her. But no one spoke up for her. For once, the entire street stood silent, watching as the woman who had made all our lives miserable was finally being taken away. I could feel the tension in the air, a mix of relief and shock, and as I looked around at my neighbors, I saw the same emotions reflected in their eyes. But even as Karen disappeared into the back of the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that the damage she had done would linger. The inspectors assured us that everything stolen would be returned, that charges would be filed, that justice would take its course, but my mind kept circling back to one haunting thought. How much had she seen? How much of my personal life had she pried into during all those nights of stealing? The idea made me shiver, and I realized that even though she was gone, the scars she left behind would take much longer to heal. That night, as the crowd dispersed and the inspectors packed up their evidence, I stood in my driveway staring at the mailbox that had been at the center of this nightmare. It looked so ordinary, so small, but it had become the stage for a story that none of us would ever forget. I thought it was finally over, that Karen's arrest meant the end of this dark chapter. But then one of the inspectors turned to me and said something that froze me in place. He told me that what they found inside her house was only the surface, that there were other things they needed to investigate, and that this case was far from closed. And in that moment, the relief I felt began to fade, replaced by a deeper dread, because I knew the truth. They hadn't yet uncovered everything. The night after Karen was arrested, I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything that had happened and everything the inspector had hinted at when he said this case was far from over. And though part of me wanted to believe it was finished, that the nightmare was finally behind me, I knew deep down there were still shadows left to uncover. The next day, the inspectors returned to the neighborhood and began speaking with people door to door, asking if they had missing mail, if they had packages that never arrived, if they had ever suspected anything strange, and the more they asked, the more stories poured out. An elderly couple said they had been missing their medication for months. Another family admitted their tax documents had vanished. A young woman said she had been waiting for a job offer letter that never came. One by one, the pieces of the puzzle came together, and every piece pointed back to Karen. Every lie she had told, every smirk she had flashed, every time she had acted like the innocent neighbor hiding in plain sight. The inspectors shared with us later that her house had been filled with mail. Piles of letters stuffed into boxes, open packages tossed carelessly into closets, envelopes ripped apart and discarded like trash, but some of the contents still intact. It was clear she hadn't just taken for necessity. She had taken for the thrill, for control, for the sick satisfaction of holding our lives in her hands and knowing we couldn't stop her. When they showed me the stack of letters with my name on them, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because I finally had proof, I finally had my things back, but sorrow because those letters had been read by eyes that had no right to them, touched by hands that had no respect for the meaning behind them. My mother's birthday card was there, the envelope ripped but the gift card still inside. My personal bills were there, late fees now piled up because I had never received them, even small notes from friends that I had never gotten to read until now. Holding them in my hands felt like holding a piece of myself that had been missing, but also tainted, stained by the violation of someone I had once thought of as just a nosy neighbor. And it wasn't only me. Neighbors gathered in small groups holding their own stolen mail, some in tears, some angry, some simply stunned. It was like the entire street had been living under a spell, and only now did we all realize how deeply Karen had infected our lives. As the investigation unfolded, more details came to light. The inspectors revealed that Karen had likely been stealing mail for far longer than we suspected. Her patterns went back months, maybe even years, and yet no one had thought to question it until now. She had hidden it so well, wrapped it up in her fake smiles and her self-righteous behavior. But underneath it all, she had been building a secret empire of theft. When the authorities presented the case in court, they didn't just charge her with a single count of mail theft. They stacked the charges one after another, a mountain of evidence so heavy that even her loudest protests couldn't shake it. I sat in that courtroom watching her try to spin excuses, her lawyer painting her as misunderstood, even desperate, but none of it could erase the truth. The judge read through the list of stolen items, the names of neighbors, the dates and addresses, and every time my name was mentioned, I felt both vindicated and exhausted. The day the verdict came down, the entire neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Karen was found guilty on multiple counts of mail theft and fraud, and the sentence was clear. She would face real consequences for what she had done. She wasn't just going to walk away with a warning or a slap on the wrist. She was going to prison. As the words echoed in the courtroom, I glanced at her one last time. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, the fire in her eyes replaced with something hollow, and for a brief moment, I felt almost sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the months of fear, the nights of lost sleep, the countless letters and packages she had stolen not just from me but from all of us, and the sympathy faded. She had chosen this path, and now she was paying the price. In the weeks that followed, life in the neighborhood slowly began to return to normal, though it wasn't the same as before. There was a new bond between us, a new sense of community forged through shared pain and betrayal. We started looking out for each other more, checking in, making sure no one felt alone. People smiled more genuinely, waved a little longer, because we all understood what it felt like to be violated by someone we trusted and to come out stronger together. My mailbox, once a symbol of dread, became a symbol of resilience. Every time I opened it and saw letters inside, I felt a strange wave of gratitude, a reminder that justice had been served, that the darkness had been lifted. Still, some nights I lay awake replaying it all. The sight of Karen sneaking to my yard, the smirk on her face, the sound of the inspectors saying, "We're going to set a trap." Those memories are carved into me, reminders of how fragile trust can be, how even the people closest to us can hide the darkest secrets. But they're also reminders of strength, of standing up when it feels impossible, of fighting back even when you're scared. I had been just one voice against someone who thought she was untouchable, and in the end, that voice had been enough to bring her down. The last time I stood outside and looked at her house, now quiet and empty, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness for what she had become, relief that she could no longer hurt anyone, and pride that I hadn't given up. The inspectors told me she would be gone for years, and by the time she came back, the neighborhood would have moved on, stronger than before. And as I turned to walk back to my own home, I realized that Karen had taught me an unexpected lesson, one I would carry for the rest of my life. She taught me that evil often hides in plain sight, but so does courage. She taught me that even when someone tries to strip you of your dignity, your trust, your peace, you can take it back. And most of all, she taught me that no matter how clever someone thinks they are, if they mess with the wrong person, the wrong mailbox, justice will always find a way to bring them down.